I'll help you.
Why did he say, let's get married by the Pope at the Pope's summer residence, the Apostolic Palace of Castle Gandolfo? Why?
Yeah.
Why take it there?
This gets unfortunately very simplified, and I understand from an outsider's perspective why people say, "Oh, give me a break." She really thought the fucking Pope was going to marry her. Like, who believes that? I get that, but it did not happen like that. It was a very, very slow, meticulous weaving of this very clever lie. It started with, he wanted a big Catholic wedding in Italy, and I said, "Well, how's that going to work? We're both divorced, or so I thought." And I'm not even Catholic, and I don't know much about the Catholic religion, but I don't think Italy lets divorcees get married in the Catholic Church. And he said, "Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it all." I was very, very busy at the time. I had a new job at NBC. Meredith had a new talk show, and I was working crazy hours. And he said, "Look, you're too busy. Let me take over the planning of the wedding. Let me go and find us a priest in Italy that will marry us." And so he spent months, actually, supposedly going to one church after another in Italy, trying to find a priest that would marry us. And he would send me pictures of these churches. He would send me long texts, all kinds of stuff. And this went on for months and months and months. And finally, he just said, "I can't find a priest that's willing to marry two divorcees." And I said, "What are we going to do?" And he said, I said, "Maybe we should think of something else. Maybe we should go and get married on a beach." And he said, "Look, I'm going to go to Rome and call in a favor." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "I'm going to go to the Vatican." Now, as ridiculous as that sounds, he had told me that he had done consulting work at the Vatican, which, again, as absurd as it sounds on the one hand, also made sense. This is one of the world's leading cardiothoracic surgeons. This is a man who's rumored to be in contention for the Nobel Prize, who is doing something that nobody else in the world is doing. He's Italian. Why wouldn't he be called in to consult at the Vatican? And he had told me and many other people that he had helped consult on the previous Pope's healthcare, who actually had his trachea taken out, had a tracheotomy. He did not say that he took care of him directly. He just said that he was called to the Vatican to help. And I had heard other doctors talking about this. I had seen paperwork talking about the work that Paolo had done at the Vatican. So this was not so ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And that's when he told me, "Look, the Pope is one of my clients. He's one of my secret celebrity clients, and that I'm not allowed to tell anybody." So then he says he's going to the Vatican to ask them for help, ostensibly finding us a priest to marry us. And that's when everything went crazy town, because he calls me after this meeting. This was now October of 2014. And he says, "Look, I have great news. They've agreed to help us. They'll find a priest that will marry us." And I said, "Great." And he said, "And there's something else, and it's all so dramatic." He said, "Sit down," and all this nonsense. And he said, "Pope Francis actually agreed to marry us himself." And I said, "Oh, bullshit." I said, "The Pope doesn't even marry people." I thought he was playing some kind of game with me, to be honest. And I was so pissed off. And I actually hung the phone up on him. And I went straight to my desk. I was at work, and I literally Googled, "Does the Pope marry people?" But what popped up was 1 month earlier, September of 2014, the Pope had married 20 couples in the Vatican. And these were all couples that were, quote unquote, living in sin, that had children out of wedlock or whatever. So the Pope actually can marry people if he wants to. That's the first thing. People think he can't. He can if he wants to. So it took some convincing. It took about 3-4 days, maybe a week, actually, of Paolo convincing me. And this was also very clever. His argument to me was that because he was a Pope's personal private doctor, and because this is this very forward-thinking progressive Pope, that the Pope had been looking for a couple of divorcees that he could use as sort of a poster couple to marry publicly, to make a statement that he was willing to open the doors of the Catholic Church to divorcees. And the Pope wanted to do Paolo a favor, to thank him for being his private personal doctor. And we now needed to do the Pope a favor and do this. And so it almost became not about us anymore. It wasn't even about our wedding. Paolo made it sound like this was an obligation, that by virtue of, he wanted to do this for the Pope, and by virtue of being his fiancé, I had to go along for the ride. And I needed to do this because this was I might not care because I'm not Catholic, but this would help open the doors of the Catholic Church to, divorcees.
Put in that context, it makes sense because this is not just like Joe Schmo who you met at the Olive Garden saying that the Pope wants to perform the wedding.
Exactly. Well, that's what I always say. It's not like I woke up one day and he went, hey, the Pope's going to marry us. And I went, oh, great. It just didn't happen like that,
No, he had credentials that could potentially make that an actual thing, or at least some of them were real and some of them were fake. But he had been laying the foundation for you to believe all of this level of lie for months. Right. So it's not as outlandish as it seems. But what I don't understand, so I understood all that. Like I saw how he got you. What I don't understand is now with retrospect, can you say, why would he do that? Like, I get why he would woo you and try to reel you in, but why take it to that potentially catastrophic level? It was unnecessary. Why do you think he did it?
All of it was unnecessary. And it just kept growing and growing. I don't know. I can't get inside the man's head. I'm not an expert. I can't diagnose him. I believe he's at a minimum a pathological liar. I think he's probably also a sociopath, and he's an extreme narcissist. And I think people like that don't really have a plan. I think they get a sick rush out of the lie. They get a high out of it, out of getting away with it. And they usually do get away with it, right? And the more they get away with, the more they want to up the ante, and the bigger the high. It's like a drug. And so they don't have a plan. They're just kind of putting one foot in front of the other, and it's like a game, and I think they just think somehow they're going to wiggle their way out of this, because usually they do.
Yes, because he did not need to propose to you in the first place.
Nope.
He could have rolled along, as you said, it kind of happened soon. He could have just been rolling along in a relationship if he just wanted you to be close and in his corner. And he certainly didn't need to come up with this. We're going to get married,
none of it.
At the Pope's private residence by the Pope himself. Like, all of it was so extraordinary. And I completely agree with every word you said about the high they get. And I do think, yes, it's no accident he chose you as an NBC News producer and somebody with access to, power and messaging that could be beneficial to him. But I also think your smarts were part of the calculation. He enjoyed that. He liked that.
Exactly. That's part of the rush. I think they often target smart, intelligent women because that is part of the rush. If I can pull it over on her, it just, and that also, going back to an earlier thing with all the extravagant, elaborate surprises he was doing, I always thought that was for me, right? The roses, the lavish trips, the everything. And I now realize it wasn't for me at all. None of it. It was all about feeding his ego. When we went to a hotel and the staff was gushing because, they had helped prepare the room with all the roses and the champagne, and women at desks were pulling me aside and saying, does he have a brother? How do I meet somebody like him? And it was all for show. It's all for his ego. It's all about narcissism. None of it had to do with me swooning over him and me being in awe of, the adulation and just adoring him. Was just feeding his narcissistic ego.
Credit card rewards like cash back can empower families with extra savings while they deal with the rising price of groceries and gas. But our sponsor, the Electronic Payments Coalition, says some DC politicians are partnering with corporate megastores to take the cash back rewards away from families during skyrocketing inflation. Specifically, they say the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill would take billions from American families, lining corporate pockets instead. Learn more at electronicpaymentscoalition.org and see for yourself if you want to protect credit card rewards, and tell DC politicians to oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. That's electronicpaymentscoalition.org. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.